Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's audio webinar, Taking People Analytics from Good to Great, Predicting Employee Turnover. I'm Tom Morse, your host for today's session. Employee turnover represents a high cost to organizations and a challenge for HR leaders. This will address how organizations can use all available data to better understand the factors that contribute to employee turnover. We're very fortunate to have two experienced experts to help explore this topic in detail. Sheldon began his career as an HR strategy consultant. Blake now consults with HR departments to help transform their role and become a strategic analytics partner within their own organization. Jared Fox is a pre-sale system engineer at SAS, focused on helping organizations understand the value of analytics. He brings broad technical skills and industry experience to help customers make best use of their SaaS investments. So let me turn things over to Blake to begin today's session. Blake, the presentation is yours.
Thanks. I appreciate everyone showing up today, and I'm excited to have this hour with you all. So about predicting turnover, this is a third in our series, and Tom did a great job introducing me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my why and why I do people analytics and predicting turnover, and did a slide that one of my colleagues had put together in a deck that they had done, and I read it, and I thought I should include this in my deck. And Dr. Goodnight is our CEO, and he said his vision is that we can improve lives through analytics, and curiosity is at the heart of human progress. And this is our inner compass and why we exist. And I totally sign up to this charter. When I was a consultant and I was flying around the country and I was trying to find the place that I wanted to be and tie my career to, I saw on the best companies to work for. Now, back then it was 2014 best companies to work for, but I noticed one thing. I joined the HR department for SAS, and I noticed that Dr. Goodnight was actually using analytics to help the organization be better, more engaged, have more fulfilling careers and purpose. And so I thought, if we're doing analytics inside of SAS and we're helping our organization, how can I take this message to our customers who are using SAS? And I truly believe that through this work we can change lives, the lives of those who work for our organization. And SAS is so they first appeared, and I'm not putting this up here to talk necessarily about SAS, more about why I would choose to work for SAS and how the analytics that SAS uses helps us facilitate such a great place to work. But this is why I do this people analytics work, and I truly believe we can change people's lives. So on the predicting turnover, there are three different topics that I want to go over and make certain call-outs as I go through. So first, why about this? And you see money signs on there. Definitely, I'm sure people resonate that turnover has a cost to it, but we're going to talk a little more about that. And then now, why is this becoming such a hot topic? And lastly, okay, I signed up with that it's important and that it's happening now. How do I do it? Thinking, I heard this phrase of attract, grow, retain. I heard it repeatedly. It was in every compensation philosophy and charter of HR. I translated it a little bit into somewhat a business question of how can we increase the cumulative value an employee brings to the organization. So we have on the y-axis value, we have on the x-axis the time, and this is an employee's journey from the time that we're trying to attract that person or find them and attract them, hire them, and realizing that at that point all we've done is invest cost them to onboard, and at some point they will break even with being value to our organization and cover the costs that we invested. Sometimes that takes a year. I've heard it takes 2 years. I've heard it takes 3 weeks. Depends on the job and the role in the industry, and many things contribute to that. But if we understand the basics of this graph, we want to then see how can we extend the amount of value from our employees, re-engage them, help them grow, and have fulfilling careers. And then that part that says retain and predicting turnover, and that's part of the picture. So keep in mind, we know that disrupts the past, the present, and the future. So item effects in the past, and these are not exhaustive lists, but we had a growth plan set in place sometime in the past. Our organizations had a growth plan. We were counting on certain people to be there. When somebody turns over, there's disruption in that. Also, the investments. We've invested in salaries, benefits, so on and so forth, that had costs. And similarly related, we could have made those direct investments in other people, and the opportunity cost. Perhaps we gave a 5% increase to everybody, while if we were able to give someone 10% maybe and 0 to somebody who's going to leave, that was a different picture of how things play out. There was an opportunity cost and decision we made in the past. Turnout disrupting those decisions we made in the past. And then we know that it hurts culture and morale. Well, sometimes there might be people that you want to see leave, but culture and morale is definitely influenced, we'll say, in the present. And we know that there's a reduced productivity from that seat that person left. And we know that their work gets redistributed to others, and it's possibly not as good of quality in the products or services or whatever their role was responsible for. So there's present disruption and impact there. And then in the future, we have all succession plans in HR. Those are being disrupted. There's institutional knowledge there that we've lost, perhaps forever. The time to fill and onboard is, we know we're going to have to invest in finding another person, and there's additional training costs. And then end up having to hire a new person for that role, and a new person for that role as more people turn, and you can multiply that against however many roles are turning over at any given time, and you can see with all of these other costs that are associated with them, that becomes a big one. And that is why I imagine a lot of us are on the call today. So it becomes, how can we protect the investments and decisions that we've made in the past? How can we produce in the present? And how can we plan more effectively in the future? Since turnover is laced through all three of the past, present, and future, it has a lot of disruption going on. So let's talk about that. And this sense slide, but I'm going to try and step through it carefully. We have our on the left, right, that has predicted turnover. And we have on the top people who have actually turned over. So predicts yes, and the person actually leaves. Where that's yes, we want to reach out to those people and see if there isn't some way that we can intervene to prevent that to happen from happening. Also makes predictions and people don't leave. We're going to have a similar course of we're going to reach out to those people because our model says they're going to leave. So we're going to invest in trying to intervene in some way. There's also did not predict. And if our model did not predict somebody to leave and they end up leaving, our model missed it, we didn't reach out to them, they went unnoticed, experienced that turnover similarly to how we do today if we're not predicting turnover. Someone turns in their 2 weeks, and now we have 90 days to fill and onboard their time or job. And then where we did predict that they would leave, and they didn't leave, so we didn't really take any action. There than what we do today. So now I'm going to put some numbers up here. I imagine everyone is going to challenge the numbers. I more or less want to get the framework up here and let there be some discussion and thought about it. But let's say that the average cost per person is $30,000. And I got from looking at people, I said if your average salary is $100,000, there are metrics out there that direct cost is maybe 20 or 30% in the tech industry. So direct turnover costs, hiring costs, training, onboarding. But what's not included are all those indirect costs that I just talked about on the prior slide, how it's influencing the past, the present, and future in ways that are not quantified on this slide. Another is, let's say that for every person that we predict is going to leave, that we're going to reach out to them, and we have allocated a budget of $5,000 per person. Let's say our company has 1,000 employees, a turnover of 10%, that's 1,000 employees who are going to leave. So our budget here for outreach, if you do 1,000 times 5,000, is $5 million. So we have $5 million allocated towards intervening and outreaching to those who are going to leave our organization. Now let's see what our model does. Our model, and this is very low accuracy. Again, didn't want to hat on the models being 1,000% accurate, right? So this is a very, very low accuracy model. The print is yes, they turned over. We have 1,000 people, 600 of them we got right. Now, you can that top line, we reached out to 600 people, we reached out to 300 other people who did not end up being, so that's 900 people. If we can multiply out the math here, which is what this box starts to show, that left quadrant, the 600, they were to leave, and we presented that with a $5,000 investment. So for each 100, we saved about $25,000. For the tested 5,000 in those 300, they ended up they weren't not leaving, so that was cost, just straight cost from outreach budget. And the bottom left, those that we didn't catch, pretty costly. That's how we experience turnover today. There's a direct cost of those people leaving. And then we have the right, where basically we chose not to do anything. So that's status quo there. When I add up all of these numbers with these assumptions are fairly low, does not consider those indirect costs. It's very low prediction accuracy, and we did not optimize our outreach budget. We just said $5,000 for everybody in this bucket. That's a separate project, modeling project that you can do in optimizing that budget. But still a $1.5 million net benefit per year using these assumptions. So if you believe that turnover is more expensive, or you believe that those indirect costs are real, this picture only gets larger. And if your turnover rate is higher than 10%, then your picture also gets larger, or the number of employees. So just some concepts out there around, yeah, this is a space where cost is definitely associated with turnover. There's the opportunity to bring value to the business. Now talking about why now. And first webinar in the series, I've mentioned this Rainer Strack. He's from Boston Consulting Group. He did a TED Talk. It was called "This Crisis Looms in 2030." Now, he did that TED Talk in, I think, 2012 or early 2013. So, a little dated, but he was giving this presentation about the workforce crisis. There were three main themes in there. That 2030, we know how many people are going to exist in the workforce, and projecting out, we are going to have more jobs than people. Secondly, that we have to fill jobs do not have skills for those. So there's a skills mismatch going on. And then there's a Cold War around if the Bureau of Labor Statistics said that the computer science degree graduate today receives 3.5 job offers. What's really going to make someone decide between one organization or another? Certainly the compensation and benefits have something to do with it, but also employer brand and maybe how well you do on Glassdoor or those Great Place to Work surveys. A lot more information is going into that decision around culture wars as opposed to me just having one job offer. Not me, Mr. Degree. But, so here's somewhat of an update, right? So just recently, as of April, unemployment is at its lowest point in the last 17 years. So graphic there from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showing it from 2010 to now. So when he did his TED Talk, unemployment was maybe 8.5%. So it's trending down. This is Jeff Stockton from Deloitte. He wrote an article and he said that you basically have to be a continuous learner. In about 5 years, your skill set is going to become obsolete. Now, whether you believe that to be true or not, it's certainly perhaps directionally true. By 2030 would be more directionally true. Culture wars, I'm seeing these themes come up a lot in HR. Candidate experience, employee experience, intern experience, building the talent pipeline. And all of this is what suggests that we're switching in workforce orientation from employer to talent. Now, this is a slide that I created today because I just finally realized, and that's a picture of me, why this webinar was meant to happen today. So here's a picture from my phone. You can see that at 7:08 this morning, I received an email. I read it at 8:24 a.m. You can also see I did not charge my battery overnight. But the big there, jobs available now equal number of job lists. So I say today that we're transitioning to having more jobs than people, perhaps. And then the next item is, but is there a skills match? So here it is talking about the skills mismatch. And you see that it says, and I'll blow this up a little bit, the quit rate, which indicates whether people are confident in their ability to quit and get a new job, also rose to 2.3%. And so to put that in perspective, I included the JOLTS quit rate graph for the last 10 years. I mean, you can see that it's definitely trending up. People are more willing to quit their jobs. So perhaps this gets to the culture wars. And happening today, I would have not received this email. It would have been a day late if we did it yesterday, right? This somewhat underpins that idea of we're shifting more in the workforce orientation. All right. So now a presentation by Dave Harcourt. He works for Yum Brands. He does people analytics. They call it employee insights over there. You may be familiar with some of those brands. They have hundreds of thousands of employees. But he was on a webinar in January, meeting goals HR analytics. And this is one of his closing quotes in his presentation. Right now, HR analytics is a competitive advantage, but in 3 to 5 years, it will not be. So if you're doing it, your competitors will be. Eventually, they will be better at attracting, engaging, and retaining their employees, and that would eventually hurt the bottom line. So he speaks to this trend of moving towards more analytics in the HR space. Okay, after the first two, how do you do it? And I'm going to move to those. Ideally, you would want to be able to connect, cleanse, and transform the data you have, and then able to discover, analyze, and share those insights from one place for all user types in a safe, governed environment. Of connecting the data, unifying the different systems that you have. This is an important message based on the conversations I've had since my time in field here. I would say that 90 to 95% of the conversations are around data, or the questions I get are around data. And understanding that these different systems that you have can be put into a platform. You don't have to rip and replace to be able to do analytics. You don't have to buy the next module to do analytics or to improve your predictive model. You can have tools, and SAS being one of them, but tools that can create bridges to the way that the data is being stored in all those different systems and unify it in a way that can be for analytics. Not only that, but as you build those bridges, you can set up ways to transform that data as it's coming across. Perhaps somebody has an employee ID in one system of record and there are others, perhaps in payroll, they're using their social security number or something. There's a way to do all of that mapping in data management tools that then becomes clean and ready to use for analysis. You can role-based security so people aren't seeing what they aren't supposed to, and have a single version of truth. Data prep is 80% of the work. I think back to my consultant life when I was, Excel wizard, and I just imagine about all the hours that I billed to my clients, wasting time pulling data together and trying to get that data in a way that works to do the analysis. Coming to that, I realized how much time I billed. It almost feels wrong. But that is a key storyline, that you can get a lot of that data prep and systems talking to each other set up and not spend time on the fun side, which is, if I can all of my data, what are the different analytical techniques that I get to use? I can hold different people to do them, so whether that's my analyst or a data scientist, and I can use different coding languages. I know we have various audiences on this presentation, so some of you might be Python or R or coding in different languages. SAS interpret those languages as well to have that one environment that you get to use. It's visual based, so you can drag and drop just all your different columns of data that would be on the left into your canvas and start building with different analytical techniques that are available. So you get this level setting on the analytics process and where SAS would fit into that picture. Next, a little bit about where does the data exist that would predict people's behavior. Now we know we have HR systems that we just saw on the prior slide. ES systems, HRIS, payroll systems, benefits, data within HR. There's also data sitting in finance. There's data supply chain, CRM, MRP, pick your industry. There's some specific operational system there that is also collecting data. Perhaps it's a call center. There's a lot of data there that would be relevant to predicting someone's behavior or turnover. There's also activity platforms, emails, calendars, Excel files, text files, people's own activities, badge activity. I'm not saying that you use all of that data. There's certainly a culture discussion there about what's appropriate and what is not appropriate to use in your modeling. But that is all data that is out there. And the purpose of doing analytics, you want to be able to connect just like you would, and as I shared in the prior slide, connect to our systems, you can connect to the other systems as well and be able to use those in your models. Already in the predictive analytics and predicting turnover, make sure you're set up to do that well, because we know that the data that is going to influence your model is going to exist in not just your HR systems. You can even include something like unemployment rate in particular zip codes. That have an influence on someone's turnover. So you can include external sources as well. Last slide, but this is equipped to move you forward. And these are some third-party research. I know we have different audiences on the line, so I want to make sure that those that live by analyst reports, SAS is a premier leader in the third-party research for automation, artificial intelligence, analytics platforms. that is certainly there are 31 other Forrester reports that SAS is a leader in. So definitely equipped to move you forward. Good. So before anything, just to level set on a few concepts, primarily clustering, segmentation. Predicting turnover is half the battle. How do we improve the accuracy, as we saw on the slide? Accuracy can have a huge influence on the ROI that we get out of predicting turnover. And then how do we take action? What's the right way to take action? So segmentation, ways that people are most familiar with it is customer segmentation. It's a similar in technique, but it is not the same in application. Employees, customers. But technique of clustering and segmentation can be useful in understanding your population and those that you're predicting to turn over. So it's one step in the data mining process, and I want to step through it. So here are 5 different variables: show, how well they're paid to the market, the last bonus percentage, age, career level, talent review. These are all coming from different data sources. It's not limited by variables or data source. This would show up on the left-hand side, these 5 data elements. I would take them and I would put them into the clustering technique, and it's going to separate them statistically to different groups that have variables. So one example is here we have cluster 1, and these are centroids, so it doesn't mean that somebody's compa ratio could not be 100% that's in cluster 1, but the majority of them are 88%, which would be I'm paid 88% of the market. They receive high bonuses. They're in their mid-40s. Their career level is 4P, so that's a very established professional role, principal level. And then their talent review was that they are established professionals. So I believe that's a 9-box score, if you're familiar with that. But which could explain or influence our prediction, and to build a model to explain a particular group specifically. So if we use different variables, right, maybe we didn't use age or didn't use career level, we want to test some other hypothesis, we could very easily swap out the variable, find different groups, and continue that data mining process to figure out, is there a population here that we're very concerned about? Perhaps top performers or people who stay for a very long time, or a very select list of top performers. So different techniques that you can use to better to do your modeling or to understand your modeling. To pass over to Jared, and he's going to share a demo of predicting turnover.
Should be able to hear me. Thanks, Blake. I appreciate that. So basically, Blake introduced us, to the importance of HR analytics and understanding turnover in our workforce. And so basically, I'm going to walk you through a use case using some typical HR data. And we'll kind of walk through a report, and I'm going to show you some different ways that you can use your data to start understanding your turnover a little bit better and understanding some of the drivers of that turnover. So first, I'm going to start off in basically what we like to call like our integrated platform space. So basically this is designed to provide access to basically the entire analytics lifecycle for a project, so from start to finish. And it's really designed for, if you look over here on the left, you can kind of see these blocks represent part of the analytics lifecycle, so accessing and preparing your data, visualizing and exploring your data, building models. These are the 2 sections we're actually going to look at today. And then beyond that, you start getting into kind of managing those models. What do you do after once you build those models and put those into production? So basically it empowers and enables all members of the team, from HR analysts to data scientists to CHROs to be able to start using a tool like this. So I'll start with this chart that I've built. And basically, I wanted to, I'm going to get some data actually from a sales organization, and I wanted to understand my workforce at large, just kind of determining trends and patterns overall for the group, and then gleaning some insights out of that high-level workforce that I can take to my HR team. And insights could be things like identifying specific segments or individuals that are at risk for attrition or turnover, spotting patterns at the company level that are flags for turnover, or even predicting how many people will be leaving the company in the near future. So, knowing these types of insights, gives us tangible actions that we can actually take to possibly prevent, employees that we want to keep from actually leaving the company, or, helping with recruitment if we have a better understanding of our attrition numbers to minimize the impact of that loss. So for example, if we know the types of positions or the teams or the types of segments that might be leaving, we can improve our recruitment efforts to offset those areas of the company experiencing that turnover. We all know that there will always be some level of attrition, and things like people who are life circumstances, essentially, people retiring, changing jobs. We kind of know that's going to happen. There's always going to be that baseline attrition. But what we want to really do is identify trends that go above and beyond that minimum baseline, and try to figure out if there are any things that are exacerbated by our culture or the management or other things within the company that we can change or improve to help prevent a trend that we don't want, essentially. So basically, let's get started. So this first page here I'm looking at, this is basically just a high-level overview of my entire sales organization. So what I did was I took some of my data over historical data of quit rates and the quit counts over a one-year period, actually, for the geographic map here. I do using SAS. I can play kind of this animation over time, so you can see it's actually playing over a year period here, and you can see the color actually represents the quit rate, and then the size represents the quit count. So there may be cases where there's like a bigger hole, but it's not really red, and the proportion of employees leaving versus the number of employees in that specific location might not be as important as you'll see some of those bigger red bubbles. Well, that has a higher percentage of people leaving, in proportion to all of the employees. So those might be areas that I'm interested in investigating. And then what's also interesting to me is the fact that we can see that spike during the year. It's just kind of that one-time spike. So for me, I wanted to investigate that and just view it a little bit differently. And that's what I did over here with this line chart. So basically, we can see the same trend in this line chart. This is actually over a multiple year period. We can see that these spikes in people leaving happen around, if I hover over one of these, you can see happen right around like the April and May time period. So, as a sales organization, I started to think, well, why is this happening around those periods? And I kind of start to suspect as an analyst that this could be due to the fact that maybe sales members, other people of this organization are leaving, after they receive like their annual bonus, for example. So this starts to kind of help me to start looking into specific patterns or trends from a geographic level, and even a time period type of way. But then I'm also curious really what the trends look like sort of at a business unit level. So rather than just as an organization as a whole, I can come down here and I'm starting to look at the quit counts by just the raw numbers, the raw number of quit counts by business unit. So over here on the left, we see IT, marketing, research and development, and so on. And basically, I can see that the IT and the support groups, they have these orange blocks represent the quit count, and then this kind of teal color represents just the employee count overall. So, there are more employees in IT and support, but we can see definitely higher quit counts for the groups. So, that could be normal for those groups, or maybe it's not normal. And that's where I can use some other ways to visualize the data to help me understand the quit rate for those business units. So that's what I'm doing here on the right under this tree map. And basically, this is showing me the quit rate kind of relative to the other business units. So not just looking at the raw numbers, I want to actually see what their proportion is to the groups. And so these green blocks over here, these represent the lower quit rates in proportion to those business units. And then these shades of red, as it gets redder, these represent high rates. So these are areas that I want to focus on, and these would be important for me. I can see that support and IT, these have the higher quit rate of any business unit. So at this point, what I would do is, I decided I'm going to dive into the IT group, and I want to understand why, what's kind of driving that quit rate and sort of a better understanding of the employees within that group to see if there's any kind of pattern that can help me, minimize the turnover in that group. Next page in my report that I created, and this first part here, so this is just a donut chart. This is basically showing some talent review survey data for the IT business unit. So now we're just looking at the IT business unit. I was able to just subset my data easily in SAS, and now we're just looking at the employees who work within the business unit. And this shows how employees fit into specific talent groups based on some surveys that they took. But really the idea is this is just kind of showing you ways that you can use any type of data that you have within your organization or that you've created. So we're kind of just getting a better idea of the proportion of the different results within this talent review here. And you'll see we're actually going to use this information a little bit later on in a model. And then at the bottom here, this line, this quit count by hiring date. So not they actually quit, but hiring date. So this is kind of an interesting way to visualize your data. So rather than looking at quit count by when people actually left the company, I can look at quit count by when they were hired. So it allows me to see any patterns and perhaps how we change recruitment methods over time, or specific hiring changes were made during certain time periods, and when changes ended up affecting turnover in the future. So again, this is just to show different ways of visualizing and exploring, typical HR data that most of you probably have, but also ways of using your own data that you've captured and bringing that into SAS to understanding, your employees better. So overall, this is a neural network, and you've probably heard that, and you're like, hey, how does a neural network help me, in an HR kind of position? But HR or neural networks are really useful in lots of different use cases. But in this case, I use this to build a model to really help predict which employees within my IT group are going to leave the company. So I'm using my current and historical data of employees who quit or have quit yet, and maybe have captured information about why they left. Did they get fired? Did they retire? Were they upset about management? To basically train the neural network to predict who will quit. And the idea is, we feed all of the data into the neural network to help improve the accuracy of our model predictions, essentially. So basically, take any kind of data that you have, and if you're, capturing data about who has quit, this example of using data mining and enriching your sources that you already have. I could have used other predictive methods to create a similar model, but I just wanted to showcase the flexibility of how you can use SAS for many different use cases. So basically, once I built my neural network, I'm not going to go into kind of the details of the neural network, but basically, once I built that, I used to predict who will quit, and I was actually able to, if you build this, you can do this in a lot of different models within SAS, but if I right-click section here within the model, I can actually see who basically predict who, I've already done this, but I can predict who is going to quit based on the current data that I have of my current employees who haven't left the company yet. Basically, once I did that, I added a marker that said, okay, if this person has higher probability of quitting, I want to basically mark them as like a significant risk. And then at a level of people who fall within sort of like higher to mid-range, I set them as a moderate risk. And then everybody below that has just kind of like a minor risk of leaving the company. So kind of deciding based on the probability results from the neural network or any other model I create, like a basic logistic regression, I can tell SAS, hey, I want to set these different thresholds and kind of determine if those are important to me or not in terms of are they significant or just minor. We'll see how that's actually used in the next scene here. So basically, I kind of predicted who's going to leave, but now that I kind of have a better understanding of who's going to leave within the IT group and the different segments and attributes that make up the IT group. And there's kind of two ways that you can go about doing this and that I used here in SAS. Really, there's the cluster method that Blake mentioned earlier, and then there's a decision tree. So I'm kind of using both hand in hand. So basically, these are two different ways that you can classify employees using demographic or behavioral data that you have, or categorical data like the career level or the talent review data that we saw earlier, or even compensation or bonus information that you have. So basically, this cluster analysis that you see here at the top, I basically just dropped in the data that I wanted to use in SAS into this cluster, and then it just automatically created the cluster segments for me based on the clustering algorithm. So SAS kind of does all that back-end work for you. And I'm just going to point out a few cluster IDs. So basically, this is the same kind of picture that Blake was showing earlier at the bottom. This is just another way to represent what my clusters, how my clusters are kind of similar to each other, and why it makes up that the clusters. You can see here, if I select one of these clusters, we have 5 clusters. Click ID 4. You can kind of see the overall pattern of all the employees that fall within cluster 4 along this kind of path here. Their comp ratio, bonus, we have some demographic information, their career level, that talent review information. And you can kind of see the darker paths here. This represents all of the employees that kind of fall within that cluster ID 4. They tend to take this kind of path. Now, if I select, let's select cluster 1 here, I can see, for example, now this is a different group. Even though this is all within my IT business unit, different employees are going to show different attributes. So in this group, I can see the comp ratio and the bonus is a lot higher for this group, spread out across some demographic information and their career level. So kind of similar to number 4 in terms of their demographic information, career level, and talent review. But you see their comp ratio and their last, the bonus that they're getting is actually quite different than number 1. So even within, my IT business unit, I could segment out and get, more granular insights about those employees. So a great example of using data mining. And what I did was, at this point, you might say, okay, what do I do once I create these clusters? What can I do with them? Well, there's a couple things you can do. So kind of like I did earlier with the neural network, you can basically derive what's called derive a cluster ID variable, and it just adds a new variable to your data set. So it kind of enriches your data set. It creates a new variable, and then it places a number within those variables. So it puts the clusters 1 through 5 within that variable, which I called compensation cluster, and then it assigns a cluster ID number to each employee. So I'll go ahead and take that variable, and I can start visualizing it, or I can use it in other models. And so basically at this point, I've looked at which business units have the highest quit rates, kind of on that first overview. And then we understood that, our current employees, our current IT business unit has some of the highest quit rates. And then we just did a quick segmentation of my IT employees in the groups to help within our next step of the data mining process, which is where the decision tree comes into play. Basically, over here on the right, this is my decision tree. So I'm using the decision tree to help me determine some tangible insights for what to do about the turnover levels that I see within the IT business unit. And so in order to do that, I need to understand the behaviors or the attributes of the people at risk for leaving. So not only just the sense, but I want to understand the kind of the attributes of the profiles of those people. And the decision tree is really good at helping me do this. So it helps point out the variables that are important attributes in someone leaving. And what this variable importance section up here shows me, so it actually shows me any of these kind of larger or darker bar charts here. These represent the most important variables within my my IT group that kind of has a importance or an important attribute for people who tend to leave. And this is where I'm actually using the neural network predictions as well. So the neural predictions, you can see it down here at the bottom. I'm actually using that to kind of classify or categorize my employees by that significant factor or a moderate risk or a minor risk factor in leaving the company. And so the decision tree is using that data plus the variables I have here to send out and kind of profile my customers, or not my customers rather, but my employees. And see that really the nodes or the areas that I'm interested in looking at are these green nodes here. So these indicate employees that over index or have a very high likelihood of leaving the company, so that they're at significant risk. If I hover over this node, it basically shows me kind of like a profile or the attributes that I talked about earlier that indicate why these people tend to leave in terms of you can see their career level, their person status, you can see the talent review information we have, and then we can even see that cluster ID. So those we can see 4 cluster IDs. Those cluster IDs of our IT groups, those are the people who have a higher risk of leaving the company. So you see here, this is kind of a nice full cycle data mining process where we're actually using other insights that we're gathering along the way to help improve our understanding of turnover within the organization. So basically, at this point, now that I have a better understanding of the attributes of the attendant risk and kind of seeing who's significant, then our IT group, and predicting the people within our IT group using that neural network, predicting who will actually leave, I want to forecast turnover for the near future and just get an understanding of the drivers or the why that leads to someone leaving, more from like a macro level, from like an organizational level. That's where I created this forecast. Basically, at the top here, this first kind of line of dots here. So these are basically the plots showing my historical quick count. You can see here, this is my quick count over time. So at the bottom, we can see a couple years worth of data. So these are all the quick counts for each of those time periods. I can see what's happening is, over time, it's slowly increasing my quick count, slowly increasing. And then the line represents basic forecast. So I'm actually creating a forecast here. So everything past this vertical line, this represents my forecast into the future. You can hover over one of these sections here. It's going to show me the actual date and then the actual number that we are guessing or basically forecasting that will quit during that time period. And again, we're looking at the IT group. So basically, beyond that, so now that I've created this forecast, okay, what do I do with that? I can kind of see it slowly increasing, but maybe I don't know why, maybe just from a high level sort of organizational view. So this is where I can add some underlying factors to my forecast to get a sense of whether, any of my variables in my data are significant factors. So we kind of looked at it more from an employee standpoint, segmenting them and kind of predicting them at an individual level, but now we look at it more at a company level. So, basically what I added here was some different training programs that we've been running, some economic data like unemployment rates, team numbers, and a few other things that were kind of happening within the company. And then what happens is SAS basically takes all of these variables and determines if they are a significant factor in affecting my quick count forecast. And I can see what happens here is SAS automatically does calculations for me and determines which ones are significant factors. And that's what we're seeing here. So these are underlying factors affecting my quick count forecast in that near future. So I could here I had a few training programs, but it chose it actually picked training program A, and basically is showing that hey, if we see down here, as we increase our training program, for some reason we're actually seeing a slight increase in our quick count. So this could be a good indicator of maybe exploring our training programs and understanding if there needs to be any changes with that training program. I can even see here it even picked unemployment rate within the area. So as that increases, as the unemployment rate increases, we can actually see a change in quick count as well. So maybe that's a good indicator of, as we're seeing trends in unemployment, that help us to start planning for the near future with turnover. And then even a third factor picked, which is team number. So basically, this is saying this run here. This is just showing basically it's the team number that that each employee is assigned to within the IT group, and so that help indicate certain teams that need to be addressed or have conversations with the managers, things like that, to start kind of seeing it from a company-wide view, even from a macroeconomic view. So now what I have here is I added in this table to basically show me some tangible results or some tangible actions of actual employees who are at a significant risk for leaving the company based on my neural work I created earlier. And so this is where I'm seeing my significant, anybody who fits a certain threshold or falls within a significant threshold, I'm setting them as red. So I actually adjust and set certain display rules or indicators that I can quickly see. And so as I scroll through, I can find certain employees that may be of interest or of significant risk of leaving the company. Just knowing who might be leaving the company is not just necessarily helpful on its own. So that takes me back to where I started with looking at which business units are showing some of the highest quit rates, which is what we saw in this first section, and any seasonal or geographic patterns related to turnover, and get kind of deep dive into the IT business group because they were showing some higher than usual quit rates, and I saw that a little bit deeper into their quit count by hire dates to see if there was anything significant with the way that we were recruiting. We took a look at some of the attributes and characteristics of IT employees within the group who are at a significant risk of leaving. So we created a couple models here to try to predict that. And that, what we just talked about was, more company-wide initiatives and macroeconomic events that are underlying factors for driving people to the company. So, so that includes the demonstration portion of that. I hope you guys got some value out of this. Like I mentioned earlier, I think with SAS, there's a lot of ways that you can use your current data that you have to actually start exploring the data and modeling it and get a better understanding of your employees and turnover, and really focusing in on the employees that you actually, want to keep within the company, and start, kind of changing the narrative on how you interact with them. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Blake to review some of the insights we discussed today. Blake?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to put up a slide here, and as we talk concept of protect, produce, and plan, relating it to what Jared was sharing on the tech side, those underlying factors, thinking about the past, how we influence some of those factors or understand them better, because that's going to influence our overall strategy. And then in the produce side of things, where do we reach out and how do we, what's the best way to reach out? That's a whole other project. And then forecast and hiring. If we can identify the people who are likely to leave, perhaps a portion of those people we would like to leave, but the person that we are going to keep, how do we do them for those that are leaving? How does that our hiring needs? Can we start hiring for, if we know that 10 are going to leave, 5 of them want to leave, and when they do, should we start hiring for their roles now to reduce the time to fill and lower the amount of disruption that's going on? So with that, I do have, I think we have a couple of minutes. Tom, is there time?
I think we have time for just a couple of questions. One that came in very early on is, do I need to have all my data integrated to begin work on something like this?
Good question. So the reality is, and David Harcourt actually talks about this in that MIT presentation, that the level of effort that you want to put into it versus the amount of results that you get. A project that is small and high value, those are few and far between, but a good one is doing some data mining on employee engagement surveys. But an idea of where you're just picking up in a CSV file, maybe connecting it with other data if you have it, and data mining on it. That's low-level integration. But if you do a single view of the employee and understand their journey into the company and what's happened to them since they've been inside the organization, that would require more integration. But there are definitely projects that we work on that are streamlining more that process of what's the limited amount of connection that I need to do for this problem, and it becomes very business specific.
Okay, we probably have for one more question real quick. There were a couple questions around TextMiner and Enterprise Miner. The question is, can you analyze text in SAS, and are you able to use those data to predict turnover?
Yeah, you can mine text with SAS for sure. Jared could probably give a great explanation of all that, but you absolutely can mine text, use those themes into your analysis, see if they contribute to some of predictions and turnover. I could an exit survey having a good influence there. So absolutely.
I think we have run out of time for our 1-hour presentation, but Blake and Jared, on behalf of today's audience, thank you for a terrific and very informative presentation. Wish we had time to get to more questions, but I know that we will be following up with our audience and be sending them information where they can go for more details on these and other solutions. Before we conclude, I want to invite you to connect with SAS on social media, be it Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, whatever is your social channel of choice, and join and participate in the ever-growing SAS communities, which are quickly approaching 200,000 members. And don't forget to read and subscribe to any of our many SAS blogs. Thank you for joining us today. We know that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.